Elizabeth Day is a world-renowned podcast host. She's a best-selling author. She's a successful journalist.
I felt like a failure, but I probably wasn't. It was what I'd been told to feel. I've had countless failed relationships and it sucks. Like heartbreak, there is no pain like heartbreak. I now realise that I learned something very instructive from each one of those relationships and from the fact that they ended. It taught me something that I needed to know about myself. Infertility and miscarriages is not a mishap. Like for people who experience it, it's a tragedy over which they have no control. And the idea that I was exploiting it to make a full-time career out of it was so insulting because I know how fucking painful and traumatic it is to go through.
Being vulnerable. Something I think we all find it incredibly hard to do. And after hearing my guest's story today, I had tears in my eyes maybe 3 or 4 times. And that's because she is willing to be vulnerable and honest and open about her truth, her trauma, and the things she's learned from her most testing times. Elizabeth Day is a world-renowned podcast host. She's a best-selling author. She's a successful journalist. And honestly, she's quite frankly one of the most wonderful, smart, lovely people I've ever had the privilege of doing this podcast with. In fact, today, one of the issues I had with this podcast was we agree on so much that it's hard to play devil's advocate with her. It was hard to challenge her views because so many of them represented mine. It felt like she was reading out of my book. And I think that's powerful because she helped me build on my ideas. And some of these ideas are controversial. For some people, maybe too controversial. It is remarkable how much societal expectations can cripple your chance of happiness. And I genuinely believe that if we had more people in the world like Elizabeth who were willing to say what she says today, then maybe that wouldn't be the case. Without further ado, I'm Stephen Bartlett, and this is the Diary of a CEO. I hope nobody's listening, but if you are, then please keep this to yourself. One of the things that I wrote recently, which after doing a little bit of reading about your story and your journey, really, really resonated with me, was this idea that society's expectations of how your life is supposed to be going will fuck you up. And when I think about, you've written this amazing book called Failosophy, about failure. I was thinking, what is failure? And my conclusion was that failure is like a byproduct of social expectations. And as is success. So could you talk to me a little bit about how social expectations have made you feel like a failure?
Of course, yeah. I realised I had to define failure after I had launched a podcast called How to Fail and after I had written a book called How to Fail. And then I kept getting asked this very reasonable question. And I realised I'd never come up with a satisfying definition for me. So the definition I came up with in Failosophy is that failure is what happens when life doesn't go according to plan, which totally taps into what you've just asked me about. Because then you need to start to think, well, where does the plan come from? Is it genuinely my plan? Is it genuinely what will make me happy? Or is it what I've been told I should expect my life to be? Because when I looked at some of my metrics for how my life should be, and I put that in quotation marks, it kind of came from like 1980s rom-coms and patriarchal society and conditioning, and the idea that I'd been raised in the 80s to be a nice, pleasant, pliable girl, whereas boys were enabled to be mischievous, and that was seen as kind of cute and charming. And that led to me being an inveterate people pleaser, which I know is something that a lot of people have in this kind of industry. And it also led to me imagining that I wanted to be married and have children. And that's what I tried to do. And in my 30s, I did get married to the wrong person. I ended up getting divorced, and I tried but failed to have babies and went through various fertility treatments that were emotionally devastating in various ways. And it got to a point when I was 36, divorced, didn't have children, where I really did feel like a failure. And the reason I felt like a failure is because that's what society had conditioned me to believe of myself. Because actually, after I'd got over the pain and the grief caused by that seminal relationship ending and by all of the IVF and coming to terms with my first miscarriage and all of that, I actually felt strong for having withstood it. And I actually felt kind of liberated too, because I had no plan for the future. And having no plan for the future can be terrifying. And it can also be this enormous opportunity to change your life and to redefine it according to who you really are once you've stripped back that pretense. So that's one way in which I felt like a failure, but I probably wasn't. It was what I'd been told to feel.
So I want to like pick around this a little bit, because I can resonate with this tremendously. In fact, that's why my book has the name it does, is because I was conditioned as a black kid who was broke to believe that the thing that would make me a success was becoming this happy, sexy millionaire with a Range Rover. And that's what I wrote in the front page of my diary. That, you know, that's a kid from Africa who in Africa had nothing but was, you know, my family were happy. Bring that kid into a context or a context where the context is telling me that unless you're this, you should feel like shit. That's why as a kid, I was like, well, I need to have happy, sexy millionaire. To be fair, if I'd wrote something else, it would have been white, straight hair, right? I was relaxing my hair chemically from the age of about 12 till about 16. So my hair was straight. But I want to go back to this point about society telling you what you should want. Did you ever figure out what you actually wanted?
That's such a good question. Also, thank you for sharing what you just did.
Yeah,
because I know that, you believe like I do that vulnerability is the source of connection, true connection. And that was really beautiful. I think I have figured out who I am now, but I sit here as a 42-year-old having only just figured that out. And the reason I figured it out is because of all of those things that went wrong. Those relationships that ended, that imploded, the jobs that weren't right for me. Like that was what prompted me to do the soul searching. And I'm a big believer in things happening for a reason, the universe unfolding as is intended. Even if you can't make something meaningful as and when it's happening because it's traumatic and it's devastating, I tend to believe that there will be some meaning in there in the fullness of time. There'll be something that I needed to learn. I wish sometimes I'd learned the lessons more quickly, because I believe I kept being sent the same lessons until I really, really learned the thing that I needed to learn. Yeah. But I do think now that I'm aware of who I am because I've redefined my notion of success. So in the past, my success was not necessarily being a happy, sexy millionaire, although I wouldn't say no. In the past, I had a very different contextual upbringing from yours. And I'm immensely privileged in many ways. And one of the ways in which I am privileged is that there was a lot of kind of creativity and cultural discussion in my home. Like I was surrounded by books. I was never taught to feel that that was odd, that I read all the time, or that I wanted to be an author, even though there was no one in my family who did that. So I had those kind of conversations, and that's an enormously wealthy way to be brought up. And even though we didn't have that much money, that was very wealthy. And so for me then, success was about doing well at school. It was doing well academically. And I realized that when I did well at an exam, I got approval, and that for me became a substitute for self-worth. So for a long time, I was on this feedback loop where I was like, if only I could just do better and do better at more things, eventually I'll feel I'm worthwhile. And I was on a hiding to nothing, because actually I was outsourcing my sense of self to everyone else's opinions of me and to kind of external validation. And I've now realized, and it's taken me a long time to realize this, that my only validation that means anything can come from within and from my cornerstone relationships. So like the 4 or 5 people I love most in the world whose opinion actually means something to me. That's what it is. Now, having worked that out, how can I bring my authentic self into every area of my life? And that's why the podcast has failed, and the books about failure have genuinely been such a gift to me, because they've enabled me to connect with a really big audience whilst being my true self, whilst taking the risk to be vulnerable. And that for me is success, being my authentic self in integrated self. So like professionally, personally, and when I'm asleep, like or in my friendship group, or when I'm stroking my cat, it's always the same me.
I talk in, so I hate fucking plugging my own book, but the reason I'm doing it is because we very much think the same. And one of the chapters in my book is about making your context smaller and healthier in an age of social media where I can compare myself to a billion people who are all filtering themselves in fake. I implore like people to make their context, which is what you've described, these like 4 or 5 people, much smaller, like unfollow and mute all the toxic people in your comparison bubble or whatever, and make it tight and healthy. That's so hard these days. Like,
it's so hard.
Do you know, like how, like I'd almost say it's impossible if you're on social media platforms and following like the Kardashians or whatever. How does one do that and also stay on social media? Like,
well, I need to ask you this, so I'm going to ask you this after I've tried to answer it, because you have to deal with it on such a massive scale, and I'm just like a micro tiny thing in comparison. So.
No, I don't think that's fair.
But the way to answer that truly honestly, I'm still a huge work in progress in that respect, because I have the capacity to be undone by criticism. Like I take it really, really personally.
Tell me how personally. Give me an example.
So personally.
Give me an example.
Okay. 2 recent examples. One is that I went, a few weeks ago, I went on a lockdown walk with a friend of mine who I hadn't seen for over a year, socially distanced. It was my daily exercise that I was allowed to do with one person from another household. And I posted a picture of us socially distanced in a park on Instagram, being like, this was really good for my mental health, such an enjoyable walk. And someone commented saying, this is so irresponsible of you to post this because hospitals are overwhelmed with COVID patients and you're encouraging people just to like go out and about. And I was like, hang on a second. That's where I go with it. I was like, oh my God, I've done something wrong. Yeah. I've done something wrong. And these poor NHS doctors who are working, and I've just kicked them in the face metaphorically. And I have this process of like, I've done something wrong. I'm a terrible person. I feel really bad about it. What can I do? Should I reply? I go through that. That's the first place I go. And then I tell myself, no, leave it 24 hours. Leave it 24 hours before you say anything. And then I just feel I have this like harness that settles around me for a day of feeling unsettled and a bit worried and anxious. And are other people thinking that? Is there a whole group of people out there that they're like meeting up behind closed doors to discuss how awful I am?
Launching your cancel campaign, like.
Oh yes, and it's ridiculous. It's
one
it's awful. And I saw other people had liked that comment. I was like, oh my God, they hate me too. And basically, I just have to sit with it for a bit. And it helps me to talk about it, even though I sound completely doolally. But I'm lucky enough to have an incredible resource in my husband, who is just not on social media at all. And so is a very kind of sane mind to bring to it. And my best friend, who's a psychotherapist.
Okay, great.
And I spoke to her about it. And she was like, okay, where I would go with it is, what pain is that person in that they've lashed out in this way? And that's very helpful because it encourages you to feel compassion instead of got at and anger. I mean, that's one tiny example. Another example was Philosophy got reviewed in a couple of places. And I am really proud of that book, but it's a physically small book. I mean, it's got a lot of good content in it, don't get me wrong. And as you know, it's hard to make big ideas accessible. But I did not expect it to get reviewed in the national press. But it did. And it got reviewed by people who wanted to find fault with it, who did not like the fact that I seemed to be exploiting failure for my own success, which is absolutely not the case. Like, I want to share the stuff that I've learned. That's all
Fucking
I want to do.
Exploiting failure for your own success. Fucking hell.
Anyway, so that was just like, I went down a rabbit hole of looking at the reviewers' Instagram and all of that sort of stuff, which is terrible. Anyway, I know I shouldn't go down these rabbit holes of self-loathing. And most of the time, I'm able not to. But just occasionally, if I'm feeling low or particularly sensitive that day, it will affect me. And my tactic for protecting myself is absolutely, as you said, to unfollow and mute, to curate my feed, to keep my phone on airplane mode in the morning. So my phone is not the first thing I look at. When I'm writing, I put my phone on airplane mode as well. And I find it a real relief. and also to try and practice the art of generosity and to believe in abundance. Because I think a lot of my mindset around competitiveness or envy is because I believe in a scarcity of resources, and I believe success is scarce, and I believe money is scarce and love is scarce, and we all have to compete for it. Yeah,
like a zero-sum game.
Exactly. Yeah. And actually just flipping the switch and being like, no, the world is abundant and everyone's success can mirror your own. Like, and if you give and if you come at life from a generous place, then hopefully that will feed back to you. So those are my tactics.
Interesting.
How do you deal with it?
So I think it's important to be honest as well. I've read a lot about this topic. I've spoken to psychologists. I've sat here with guests and, asked them about this. And this is probably maybe a liberating, but also a terrifying answer. Even I have exactly what you described.
It feels so much better.
Do you know what's funny? The reason when I was laughing, you said to me, "Oh, I know it sounds cuckoo." I was laughing because you were telling me my life.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like I will get one comment on one thing, and I'll be like, "Let's look at this Jonathan Davis and find out all about." You know what I mean? I'll fucking find out how his family are. And it'll be it's just some like flippant comment, surrounded by 1,000 positive ones. Yeah. But I'm like, I'm going to find this guy's birth records and we're going to find out, you know what I mean? Like private investigator. And the way you describe that feeling of like, it bothers you. You're like, shall I respond? Sometimes I respond. I'm like, then I delete it super fast because I'm like, you rise above. And then I've also felt in the bigger moments where something more controversial has happened, I've also felt that like thing around me for about like 48 hours.
Yeah.
That feeling of like anxiousness. Yeah. Like, you described like, wait, does everyone, you think all my friends that are quiet, they all think that I'm finished, you know what I mean? And they're not saying anything.
Am I adopted?
Yeah, like, exactly. So here's my productive conclusion though is one of the things we're not taught to do is to use social media in a conscious way. So we like sign up and then we just go with the algorithm and the algorithm will be like, be pretty, and then they'll clap for you, good, and then it'll be like, you do this, and then it will tell us to follow lots of people who we compare ourselves to, and create this really unhealthy context in which our self-worth is clearly our, achievement, success, and beauty is clearly less than all of these people, and because it's so unconscious, we become a victim to the algorithms and to this like awful toxic experiment. So the answer for me is just to use social media in a much more conscious way. You've described it there, which is like unfollow people that are bad for you. Turn off your notifications. On Twitter, when I do a tweet and it goes like semi-viral, I know that for the next 48 hours, I'm going to get all kinds of Twitter eggs so I just mute it straight away. I did it last night. I did a tweet, start getting all these responses, hit mute, and it's disappeared.
Yeah.
I don't see any responses.
Exactly what I do.
And this is the like conscious effort that I have to make to keep my context healthy and to protect myself.
Yeah. Do you know, I had a really interesting experience on Twitter recently, and it's fascinating because I think I care less about Twitter because I don't feel as myself on Twitter. I suppose because I'm super conscious of how you can send out an ill-thought tweet one day and like lose everything the next. Instagram, rightly or wrongly, just feels safer. It feels more like a warm bath, whereas Twitter's like a kind of shower of hail a lot of the time. And but recently on Twitter, someone messaged me saying, "Oh, that thing that was in the Times magazine about you was so unfair," and I hadn't read it. And I then went and looked at the article, and it was an interview with another author, and the journalist had compared this person to me and a couple of other people and said, now there's this trend, I'm paraphrasing, for people to use their mishaps and exploit them and turn them into full-time careers with non-stop webinars and Instagram lives. And she said, like Elizabeth Day with infertility. And I was like, that sits so badly with me because infertility and miscarriages are not a mishap. Like for people who experience it, it's a tragedy over which they have no control. And the idea that I was exploiting it to make a full-time career out of it with non-stop webinars, I've never done a webinar in my life, by the way, was so insulting to me because I had a career apart from that and before that. And it's that I choose to use my platform to talk about something that a great deal of people feel a great deal of misplaced shame over. And that was one example, in fact, the only one I can think of where I did respond because it was so deeply, deeply personal to who I was, and I felt an attack on my integrity and a complete misreading of what I was trying to do. And I tweeted something that was really calm and that was like, I refute this for these reasons. And it was an excellent lesson in how sometimes it is important to stand up for something. I had an outpouring of incredible support from other people who I'd never met, which meant a great deal to me. Mm-hmm. The journalist in question had the grace afterwards to apologize, but they changed the wording in the online piece. And if I hadn't sent out that tweet, there would be no record of it having happened. Mm-hmm. And these things are really important to call out sometimes. So I think when it's an attack on the integrity of who you are and what you do, then sometimes it is worth drawing breath and saying something calmly and just stating your position.
And in that case as well, the courage, shall I say, to speak about, to have that vulnerability creates a culture where more people will speak out. And it's that, and that is so powerful and helpful for so many other people who are going through that and can't find a voice that they can relate to, and create that sense of understanding by hearing your stories. Same with the mental health conversation over the last 10 years. If people weren't speaking about it, the place we'd be in is quite terrifying to think of. And you wouldn't say those people have exploited it, right? So it's just it's such a nonsense thing for someone to write that I don't want to spend too much time talking about it. Quick one, starting from the minute the lockdown is lifted, we're going to start bringing in some of our subscribers to watch how this podcast is produced behind the scenes. It means you get to meet the guests, meet myself, and see how we put all of this together. If you want that to be you, all you've got to do, hit the subscribe button. So let's talk about people pleasing.
Yeah.
You said you're a people pleaser.
Yes. Well, I'm a reformed people pleaser.
Okay, so you used to be.
No, I don't give a fuck what you think, Stephen.
Oh, shit. Okay.
I really do. Yes. So I, like many women of my age, was raised in the 80s and early 90s in a culture where it was still very, very gender stereotyped. I mean, we've come so far in the last decade, I think, in understanding that. But as a result, I always thought that my worth as a person was predicated on keeping other people happy. Yeah. So I got into a series of long-term monogamous relationships from the age of 19 to 36. Like that, the biggest gap between those relationships was like a month.
You're joking.
No, because I was like, who am I unless I'm making someone else happy, unless I'm being someone else's perfect partner, unless I'm trying to second guess what they might want for dinner. And when they ask me, like, where do I want to go for lunch? I don't know, where would you like to go? Like, that was my life. It was ridiculous. And it manifested itself at work as well. I was always the person who said yes to overtime, yes to the commissions that no one else wanted, because I thought eventually I'll be rewarded. And I got a staff feature writer job at The Observer, a Sunday newspaper in the UK, when I was 29, and I was the youngest feature writer there. And so I felt really intimidated. And so part of my constantly saying yes and showing willing was to try and fit in and be accepted. And actually, you just become an easily exploitable asset. And I realized after 8 years of that job that I was never going to be moved anywhere. I asked for like different roles, different challenges, and the answer was always no. And it was because I was doing too much where I was. Like, why would they want to move me? I was providing them with an excellent service where I was. I was making myself too indispensable, and I was absolutely refusing to complain.
That's what I was going to say. You weren't going to complain.
I never asked for a pay rise, Stephen. I mean, wow. Which is actually makes me feel slightly sick now looking back, because I am a feminist and I do believe women should ask for the pay that they deserve. But I didn't. I was too intimidated. And ultimately, I think people pleasing can start from a desire to be nice and to think of others. And that's a really beautiful thing. But taken to its extreme, which is where I would put myself, it actually becomes very selfish, because you never take the time to know who you truly are. And that leads you into situations and relationships that you shouldn't be in, because you're not fully giving yourself. You're giving a version of perfection to someone that is never fully real.
Yeah.
So I never felt able to show who I really was. And that's the state of mind I got married in. And little wonder that it ended.
Is that why you think it ended?
Part of the reason. Like, I definitely found it very difficult to find my voice for a long time.
What does that mean in a relationship?
It meant that I was extremely conflict avoidant. So instead of saying how I felt about something, I would turn it inwards and be silent and then get mildly depressed. So that's a difficult person to be with. They don't seem difficult at all because they're like, look, I've cooked you dinner and I've got all your favorite things and I've come up with this perfectly thoughtful gift for Christmas. But that's all like distraction. It's all like, just don't look at the mess I actually am inside. So I had to do a lot of work on myself. It was part of the reason. It wasn't the whole reason. There was a whole pile of other stuff that I can't go into because it involves someone else. But that was definitely like, I do think that when a relationship ends, you have to look at yourself and be really honest about how you played into that dysfunctional dynamic to avoid making the same mistakes.
I'm not in a relationship. I've actually really struggled with relationships. And I was thinking about this last night when I was working out. I was thinking much of the reason why I've struggled is because I think I'm probably too selfish. Right? I think that I'm uncompromising as well. And it's something that I've tried over the last couple of years to really defeat in myself, which is in work, I'm required to be a certain type of person to succeed, which is like quite certain about the right approach, focused, hardworking. A lot of things in the professional environment aren't actually democratic. They're like the big decisions, they let you, the buck stops with you. In relationships, communication and compromise and being more democratic in things and really trying to meet someone else's needs are the attributes for success. Yeah. Communication, let's talk about that. How important is it to, from your experiences in relationships that have, done well by your definition and ended by your definition, to communicate how you're feeling and what your needs are?
It's so important. It's everything. I'm very interested in what you just said there. So I'm going to come back to that question you asked me. The fact that you believe you might need different modes of communication in business and in personal relationships.
Slightly different. This is like super controversial because people will think that. So communication is incredibly important in my professional life. Yeah, it's actually the things like, so in my professional life, if I don't want to do something or if I think it's a bad use of my time, I say, no, don't do it, cancel it. Whereas in my romantic life,
you can't do that.
If I don't want to do so, I don't want to go down and walk in the park, but I've got to be like, fine. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And I can be, I'm super in my professional life, I'm a radical about how I spend my time. Because you get so many things calling for your time. You have to be like, nope, cancel it, move it, nope. In my professional life, it's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to cook for 2 hours? Fine. My brain's like, is that an efficient use of time?
So interesting, because in your professional life as well, you're in a position where you need to know the answers. Someone will come to you for a decision and you need to know. Yeah. You need to be like a benign dictator and just be like, right, this, that. And therefore, do you think that in your personal life, you don't think it's okay to say, I don't know? I don't know if I want to cook.
It's just like the compromise of like not doing things I don't want to do.
Just don't do things you don't want to do. This is so interesting. So my now partner, husband, is amazing. And he's a CEO. And he said to me in the early days of our relationship, I never do anything I don't want to do. And I was like, oh, selfish. Yeah. I was like, I'm a people pleaser, so I don't know, wait, this is never going to work. But the knock-on effect of that, basically what he was saying is, I'm honest. And I will tell you if I don't want to do something. So if I say yes, that yes is really meaningful. And that's such a weight, it's such a weight off my mind because I'm not having to second guess whether he really means it. Yeah. When he says he'll come for lunch with my family or whatever, I know that he's invested in that. So actually...
I'm your husband for a second.
Okay.
I go, you say to me, I'd love to go and walk in the park. And I go, nah. I want to sit on my laptop and send these emails. And then 5 minutes and 10 minutes later, you go, oh, I would love to cook with you. And he goes, nope, I want to watch YouTube videos about SpaceX.
Okay. So I'm your wife and I say, I completely understand that because you're having a really heavy week at work. I'd really like to go to the park because I really want to spend quality time with you. And it would make me feel sad if we didn't do that. Then what would you say?
I'd say yes, yeah.
There you go. And do you think you'd want to say yes?
Yeah, of course I would, yeah.
There you go.
Of course. It's just, I don't know why I always fail on this thing. I just think the amount of time and attention my previous partners have asked of me, I've not been able to deliver. And I'm like, I'll text maybe once a day when I'm in like the tornado of the business.
Yeah, you're so like Justin.
Is that really? Yeah. And like, it doesn't mean I don't love you. It means that I'm in a mild crisis, which I can't tell you about because I haven't got time to like divulge all of my bullshit. So.
But sorry, you're really young, aren't you? How old are you?
28 now. Yeah.
And you're dating your age group, I'm assuming.
It's typically a little bit younger, like 2 years younger.
That's very difficult. It's so difficult dating in your 20s anyway, full stop. Amen. But when you're you and you're basically living the life and you have the wisdom of a 45-year-old, that's very difficult because the other person hasn't had that life experience yet to know.
Oh, you're so right. You're so right. Honestly, you're so right.
I'll set you up. I'll set you up with an 85-year-old.
Yeah, can you imagine?
But communication is the be-all and end-all for me. And when I met Justin, who is now my husband, it was a really difficult learning process for me because he had a very different mode of communication because he is a founder and a CEO and he didn't have time to text me, and I fucking love text. I'm a writer. That's what I hate a phone call. I've had to get used to it now in the global pandemic, but I hate a phone call. I always think I've done something wrong. Whereas Justin was always like, why would I take time to text you when I can just call you and convey the necessary information? Honestly. And he said this thing and I kept bringing it up and I was like, if I don't hear from you for like 3 days, that's really upsetting to me. And it's not going to work if that continues. He was like, okay, I hear that. He was like, for me, text is a very cheap form of communication. And it's something you do when you don't really care. And I do it a lot for work. So for me, it's much more important to spend time together. Anyway, we've sorted it out. And I think that's about having different love languages.
I thought we were going to say that at some point.
And I made him take the quiz and it was really helpful.
Was he?
He was acts of service.
Ah, no way.
But he was also...
So am I.
Yeah, there you go. It's what you do.
Oh, that's so...
But he wasn't interested in words of affirmation at all, which is mine. I just compliment me all the time.
Was he touch?
Yes.
I thought so. So am I.
Oh my God, you're literally like the same person.
Yeah.
And when he took that, I was really surprised. It was quite early days of our relationship and he hadn't given me the impression of needing touch. And then once I knew that, I was like, oh, that's lovely because I like that too.
Are you quality time and there's quality time's one of them?
Yes.
And words of affirmation, maybe?
Yes, I was totally words of affirmation when we took the test. But I think that's because I'd come off a really bad patch of relationships where I didn't feel safe in those relationships. So I was constantly looking for something to paper over the cracks. And for me, that papering came in the form of compliments. That was like the easiest thing to ask for. And so that's what I thought I needed. But now actually in my relationship, I feel really safe. So for me, it is quality time. It's still words of affirmation, but quality time is super important. And I now realize that Justin is very good at taking feedback. That's because that's the business brain, isn't it? Yeah. So I don't need to sugarcoat something. I can say, listen, I need this, or I feel this. And sometimes he'll need time. I hope he doesn't mind me talking about it. He's so private. But sometimes he'll need time to like think it through and sort of strategize it and like digest it. And I always know, it's never that he's forgotten. He'll come back and he'll be like, right, I agree. And this is the action that we're going to take. And it's amazing. And I love that. I really love that. I used to think it was unromantic. It's not at all. It's the most romantic thing because I'm being taken really seriously.
And I'm guessing, and this is a guess, but I do say it to him without too much like emotion because he sounds like a very pragmatic guy. So the way that I like to receive feedback like that from my ex was just very like without blame or like too much emotion and just like here are the facts.
Yeah.
That's the best way I like to receive feedback, you know.
Yes, completely. But separate to you getting feedback, if your partner is emotional and is crying at a film or is sad about something, so moved to tears or feeling anxious, so therefore
fine.
Yes.
That's fine.
Exactly the same.
It's just the feed, you know, because you know what I mean? You deal with people.
You don't want it with judgment.
Yeah. And in his business, I'm sure he'll deal with people all day who give him feedback in a very practical, pragmatic way. And that's the way you come used to it. And he'll have the same problem as me. Whereas sometimes in business, you'll get feedback in a very quite a helpfully emotional way.
Yes.
And now you're trying to deal with this, you're not sure which issue you're actually dealing with, right?
Yeah.
So when you present it without the emotion, I understand what I'm aiming at here. It's the same as me. Yeah. I feel like a bit of a scumbag for having acts of service as my...
No, that's a really lovely thing.
But doesn't it sound cheesy? It's like, I would like you to serve me with, you know what I mean?
Yes.
I was going through that love language thing and I was thinking, why is it that someone getting me something that they knew would help me, doing something that they knew would help me, means so much to me? Because for me, because my life is tough and challenging, I see it as them showing an action, which is actions speak louder than words, how much they cared about helping me.
Yeah.
And for me, that's like, I'm like, oh God, you know.
And also probably because you've had to be incredibly self-sufficient.
Yeah.
You're like the definition of a self-starter. You've had to rely on yourself so much that for someone else to step in and be like, I've got this for you.
It means a lot.
It's so meaningful.
And you're carrying so much. So if someone comes in and says, oh yeah, I'll carry one of these bags for you, it's like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I totally get it.
Interesting. One of the things you said was that you were, I guess, scared of being lonely at the end of your life.
Oh my gosh, yes. That's my existential fear. That
Really?
and pigeons.
Still.
Do you know what?
Maybe after this.
Interestingly, the global pandemic has been so tough and so much tougher for so many people than it has been for me in myriad ways. One of the unexpected side benefits is that I've really got comfortable with my fear of loneliness, because overnight my diary was totally empty. So I had no social engagements. I couldn't see friends. And it made me realize that I didn't really want to see the majority of people that I was going to see. Like, I'd said yes to social situations that I didn't really want to go to, but I felt like I should, and I didn't want to offend someone by not letting them down. That's still the people pleaser in me. And having the freedom to choose who I wanted to invest time in was hugely beneficial for me, because I realized actually that my core, my nucleus of people is very, very small. Yeah. And actually, if I've got Justin and my best friend, I'm good. And beyond that, you know, my closest friends, like, I actively want to see them. But I realized that I was just spending a lot of time not nurturing those friendships, because I knew that I would be able to step back into them, and I knew that I'd be accepted, because that's the level of great friendship, isn't it? Like, you're just always welcome back. And I was spending a lot of time trying to nurture these other ones that were less meaningful to me, that required more of it, because they weren't as generous in their acceptance of me. So actually, my fear of loneliness has slightly lessened now.
It's good news.
Yes, isn't it? And although you probably can't tell, I am actually an introvert, but I've successfully learned how to be extrovert and how to pretend I'm confident when I don't feel it, and all of that sort of stuff. And I've realized that I'm also pretty resilient when my world shrinks. So I think I'm going to be okay.
Fantastic. Silver lining.
Yeah.
On that point of confidence, it's something that people ask me about all the time, which is, confidence seems to be one of the great barriers of people pursuing themselves, as you described, pursuing their dreams, pursuing who they are. Some people will know who they think they are, but they don't have the confidence to take the leap, per se. Are you confident?
Yes, in certain things. So I'm confident that I can write. I'm now confident that I can podcast, that I can do a good podcast.
You're a great talker. I was thinking this as you were speaking. I was thinking, yeah, I can understand why she has a really good podcast.
Oh, thank you.
You're very like articulate, self-aware, but you're really good at, talking. Sounds like a strange thing to say to someone, but you are.
Well, I think I'm good at connecting with people. And that's something that I really cherish, because that's where all the good stuff lies for me. I love having a conversation like this on such a real level with someone and connecting. That's heaven to me. Like, this is introversion heaven. It's like, I don't want to be at a big party, like, trying to have this conversation with you. Like, that would be stressful. So I'm confident there. And you'll notice that those are all things that I do. I'm not hugely confident about myself in the sense that I still struggle with self-worth. And I realize that probably sounds really nauseating for me to sit here in this lovely place being interviewed for this fabulous podcast, drinking my cup of middle-class green tea. Like, it sounds absurd for me to say that, and also self-indulgent. But that's me being really honest. Like, I've just got that's something that I really struggle with. Like, just feeling that I'm enough.
Interesting. So the conclusive chapter in my book, chapter 20, is all about this topic.
Okay.
Yeah. And I, because I think, I spoke to some psychologists and stuff, and I batted around with this idea of this contradiction of how I could possibly be enough but ambitious.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
I know exactly
feels like a
what
contradiction.
You mean. Yeah, and that's that thing that I always fear. If I tackle my self-worth and I cure myself, will I just have no drive?
Okay, so this is chapter 20.
Okay.
And it's crazy because you'll resonate with this.
Yeah.
I actually started the chapter, set out to answer the question, and I answered it as I was typing. And so usually, as you'll discover, like in the book, is a lot of the time it's just a shitty use of words that are holding us back. So one of the things, like, is he your soulmate? That there's so many presumptions within that, like that a soulmate exists. You have one of them, you'll be able to find them. And in fact, if you ask yourself, maybe the concept of a soulmate doesn't actually exist. Same thing with, are you enough, right? So the term enough, this was my conclusion, first assumes that we can become less and more.
Yeah.
How can we become less and more?
That's a good point.
Innately and intrinsically, how can Elizabeth ever be intrinsically, inside, less or more? You're always going to be you. Same hair, same arms, same legs, same talent, same skills. You inherently, intrinsically, never change.
Yeah.
You never become less, more, enough. You just are. The reason why we have these metrics, again, is because it's an external extrinsic comparison. So I am not enough. My Nokia is not enough alongside an iPhone.
Yeah.
So I thought, in fact, and then when you have that feeling of like being less and more of enough, what you then pursue is the pursuit of becoming more. But because it was driven by external factors, your ambition becomes externally driven. So for me, I didn't think I was enough, so I was trying to get a Lamborghini. And in fact, it's the belief, it's the knowing that you never become less, more, or enough, that intrinsic feeling that makes you pursue the right things for the right reasons. So once I knew I was enough, I then went after things I actually gave a shit about intrinsically. I stopped going after Lamborghinis, and I started going after, like, I would love to do a book. I would love to learn piano. And so my conclusive point is that, in fact, it's the knowing that you're enough, and that, in fact, you never become less or more regardless of what you achieve or accomplish. That is the foundation of real ambition.
Yeah.
Real ambition is for you. It's chasing what you want for your reasons. That was my conclusion. So the enough thing is actually bullshit, which is just social, which then causes bullshit ambitions like Lamborghinis.
Yeah.
And realizing that you never become less, more, or enough intrinsically allows you to have intrinsic ambitions, and that is real ambition. That's my conclusive point.
Which is so mind-blowingly good, and also connects to that whole thing, that bullshit about soulmates.
Yeah.
Because there's that belief that a soulmate will complete you. Now, what you're saying there, you're saying that you're incomplete in and of yourself.
Yeah.
And that there's only one true way to fall in, like, all of that. I hate that.
So the question comes in a very innocent way. It's like, is he your soulmate? And it's the moment you accept it that you also accept 7 other pieces of unintended bullshit.
Yes.
Which is like that you're incomplete now, that you're a failure at not finding this person, and all of these other pieces of bullshit. It's the same with, like, for me, it's the same as, like, are you in love, or have you found your passion? Have you found your passion is like I posted about this the other day. It's like another just really difficult piece of bullshit to comprehend, because I've got to search for it. My passion, there's one of them and it's out there somewhere, and once I find it, it's going to feel great. Passion, what's that? How does that feel? You've said the word. Are we thinking of the same thing? So many pieces of bullshit, which I now have to accept. So if there was one thing that I've learned in the last couple of years, it's just like, question the question.
Yeah.
As much as you possibly can, because the question will fuck you when you accept it.
Oh my gosh, I could not agree more. Like, also, passion is such an unhelpful word. It's that thing of like, oh, did you feel passion? Did you feel this insane sexual chemistry? Did you fall in love at first sight? And I'm like, hang on a second. What you're saying there is, did you feel deeply unsettled and chaotic?
Yeah.
Because that's what passion, it's like a disruptive
Yes.
force.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't want to feel unstable and chaotic. I want to feel safe
Yeah.
and known. That for me is like true romance.
Yeah.
And a relationship or a business is not a failure because it ends again. Like you could have learned so much. You could have learned what you needed to know, and therefore you can evolve and grow.
Yeah.
And as you say, the act of finding something, what if it's like inside you? You don't need to.
Shouldn't it?
Yes, something you love to do should be something you love to do without having to like go on this
Easter egg.
quest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But that's what you were saying earlier about ambition being an external driver really feeds into one of the most profound things I've ever learned from doing all this stuff about failure. I met this man called Mo Gaudat. He used to be the chief business officer of Google X, but he wasn't happy. And he has a lot to say about expectation versus reality. So if we can manage our expectations of life, so if they're equal to or less than our perception of events and how they turn out, then we can be happy or contented. And he was the one who really brought it home to me that we are not our worst thoughts, that our thoughts are produced by our brain as organic matter in the same way that blood is pumped around our body by our heart. Like, we wouldn't think we were defined by our blood. So why would we think that we are our thoughts? But actually, as you know, the premise of all meditation is that you can observe your thoughts. Who's doing the observing? That's you. That's you. Yeah. Why would you need thoughts? You don't need to communicate to yourself. So your thoughts are just being produced by your brain constantly. And I found that really helpful. The idea that once you realize that, you can train your brain to think differently and to replace negative thoughts with positive ones as much as you're able. So he gave this incredibly moving example. His son, Ali, died at the age of 21 during a routine operation. And in the aftermath of Ali's death, Mo would wake up every morning with tears streaming down his cheeks. And his first thought would be, Ali died. And it was an unbelievably oppressive, grief-stricken thought. And after a few more weeks of it, he was like, I just can't live like this. I can't live like this. And so he challenged his brain to come up with a different thought. And each morning he would wake up and he would still think, Ali died, and he'd still be crying. But he added something to that sentence, and he added, yes, but he also lived. And in that differently expressed sentiment was 21 years of memories of a father and son who were best friends. And that was what enabled him to carry on living. And if he can do that in that situation, I sure as hell can do it when someone criticizes me on Instagram. It was a really helpful lesson.
We're never really sort of taught to challenge our thinking, right? As you say,
no.
We think it's reality. We think it's true.
And we're taught to think we need to use it to be good at exams, to get ahead, to get a good job. Like, that's all thought, isn't it? That's like the exercise for your brain. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I love my brain and I'm happy that I have thoughts, but it's that thing of understanding when they're running away with themselves, when they're in control of you.
Hard.
It is the exercise of a life.
Yeah.
It really is.
Trying to rise above your own thoughts is like...
Yeah.
Or at least analyze them, hold them out in front of you and examine them for validity.
I mean, you mentioned working out earlier. I definitely find exercise is a helpful way of doing that.
Yes.
And that's something, again, I never thought I was good at sport. And I translated that wrongly as being like someone who doesn't like exercise until my 30s, really, until I went through all this stuff, divorce, all that sort of stuff. And I needed to feel strong in myself. And that started with feeling strong in my body. And I realized that it was just an incredibly helpful way of being in my body and being out of my head. And it was just such a relief to find that.
Isn't it nuts, the way that your brain thinks while you're exercising versus when you're just in your normal life? It's bizarre. It's like a different person shows up and can suddenly see clearly.
Totally. And also for me, it feels like I'm not really thinking when I'm exercising, but I am. I will have processed something that has been bothering me for days.
So fascinating. I wonder why that is. I bet somebody knows. Just the monotony of doing a task, or whether it's a running machine or just lifting weights, for some reason, I don't know, the brain just seems to go to a different place. Most of my good ideas, if I have any, come from the gym or walking or the shower sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's why people sometimes are kind enough to ask me for writing tips and how to write. And one of the things that I say is don't feel guilty for not actually doing the writing sometimes. Sometimes you literally need to take a walk and be around people, or be on the top deck of a double-decker bus and look out the window, because your brain needs rest, but it also needs like a creative fallow period where the field is left fallow and then it becomes more fertile in the future. And all of that feeds into your inspiration.
It's so true. People don't appreciate that as one of the real upsides of exercise. They think it's to make themselves look pretty, but I think the benefit I've had to my mind through exercise is hard to put into words. Maybe the only thing that I love more in the world than Huel is salted caramel. And I've got some great news. Huel have just released their salted caramel Huel flavor. And I am over the moon because I actually got to try this before it came out. And genuinely, no word of a lie, there's my favorite flavor of everything. I've got two favorite flavors, toffee and salted caramel. And to hear that Huel now do salted caramel has made my dreams come true. I've been a Huel fanatic for the last 4 years, as a lot of you know. It's the reason that I'm in the best shape of my life. It's the reason why I have the energy I have to do this podcast and to manage the schedule that I have. And as we come into the summer months and my training schedule in the gym has started to change, it's become more important than ever that I don't miss some of the sort of basic nutritional components of my diet, like proteins and like amino acids. And that is where Huel fits. So yeah, thank you so much. And fuck me, salted caramel, dream come true. I want to talk about failure.
Yes.
Now, which seems like a good thing to talk about. And in your book, Failosophy, you list 7 failure principles. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure you've done this a million times, but I think it's a good place to start. So the 7 failure principles.
Yes.
Number 1, failure just is.
Yes. So that actually just feeds in with what we were talking about, which is the idea that failure is a fact. It's inevitable. It's going to happen to all of us. No matter how much we try to avoid it, I guarantee that it will happen. And that can feel scary, but it can also feel liberating, because once you've accepted it as a fact, there's no point in trying to avoid it. So you might as well take the risk. So acceptance of failure starts with the observation of it. Failure is a fact, but how you respond to it is within your control. Whether you decide to feel like a failure for many years after the thing that's happened, or whether you think to yourself, okay, well, that's taught me something and I'll do it differently next time.
I guess the risk there is one bad failure and people stop trying.
Exactly.
And then I was thinking, it's very similar to confidence in the way that, like, if you have one bad failure, your performance next time you get an opportunity, if you actually don't manage to just avoid it completely, will probably be worse because of nerves and that, the memory of I'm terrible. And then that's going to increase your chances of failing again. And then the kind of like self-negative reinforcing cycle kind of continues, and your confidence and your sort of, your guts kind of cascade downwards, and can, for some people, work in the other direction where you have a success, your confidence builds, you walk on stage to do that, public speech next time around with a bit more confidence, you do a better job, which increases your chance of success, and it cascades upwards. Is that how failure works from your experience? Or?
It can work like that. I mean, to take the example you've just given, one of the ways of looking at that, if you're then stuck in a downward cycle and you're failing and you're trying the thing, is that you're therefore in the wrong situation. So you're in the wrong workplace, for instance, that isn't generous enough to like make you feel okay after your failures, or doesn't make you feel like you can be your true self, in which case I would argue you need to remove yourself from that situation and find the place that does suit you. Mm-hmm. Or it can be a question of mindset, and a question of applying that mindset that we've just talked about, which is, okay, I failed, I'm feeling in a downward spiral. How much of that is fact? That's a very difficult thing to do on your own when you're at a very low ebb. And that's why I'm a huge advocate of therapy. And again, I know that I come from a privileged place where I can afford therapy. But even if it starts with reaching out to your friend and talking about it, or reaching out to your work helpline and talking about it, or texting Shout, the mental health charity, or calling the Samaritans, that's a really valuable step. And the other thing that I would say there is that I'm very aware that my definition of failure, which is what happens when life doesn't go according to plan, has a fatal flaw, which is that sometimes there are failures that are totally cataclysmic, that we couldn't possibly have predicted, that go against any plan whatsoever, like a global pandemic, like a terrible illness that you contract, like the death of a loved one. It would be monstrous for me to sit here and say, those failures are as easily assimilated or learnt from or dealt with as failing your driving test. And so I'm not saying that at all. Those kind of failures will require a process of mourning and coming to terms with the thing that you've lost. And that's absolutely right and as it should be. My only thing is the way that I choose to live my life is I mourn, but I don't have to constantly relive the pain. I can still feel sadness about something, but I don't need to live in that place of reliving it constantly.
Becoming a victim?
Yeah. And becoming defined by that. I can choose to be defined by something else. I can choose to be defined by my response to it. I can choose to find some kind of meaning in something that was meaningless at the time. And that's how I choose to live my life, because that makes it less sad. And I think that choice is available for most of us.
Topic of conversation that I liked having on this podcast, as you're alluding to there, is about like personal responsibility. And, we all have different starts in life and different, quote unquote advantages and disadvantages. But how important do you think personal responsibility is, even in times where something happened and it's really not your quote unquote fault?
Yeah, I think it's tremendously important. I want to caveat what I'm about to say by saying I'm very aware that certain people are given more opportunities to fail because of the elitist society in which we live, because of the racist society in which we live, because of a society which marginalizes entire groups of people through no fault of their own. I'm aware that I, as a white middle-class woman, have been given shitloads of opportunities to fail. So I'm totally aware of that there's a sliding scale.
You have to say that, right?
Yeah, of course I have to say that. Because I don't want people to think that I haven't thought about it.
Yeah,
and I also think that it's important to have the discussion.
Oh, it's crazy how many caveats we've got to do before we say anything these days. Like, I don't care that much. So
you're going to get me into trouble.
I find it, when I sit here and I speak to guests and I watch them have to caveat something they're going to say, I just find it so funny, because I'm like, I personally do that to some degree, but I'm like, oh, what are you going to... I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting because this is a growing thing, because you're right. If you hadn't have done that, someone would have...
Yeah, and someone would think, oh, well, it's all very well for her to say that. And like, it's just a kind of acknowledgement that it's been easier for me in certain respects.
Which is fair. And
it's been hard in other ways. Like, everyone has their own lived experience. Like, I'm talking from a place of, I wrote a book called How to Fail, which was part memoir, part manifesto. Like, a memoir by its nature cannot be intersectional. Like, I'm speaking from my own life and I'm bringing in voices of other people who can speak to those experiences, because it would be delusional and offensive for me to try.
Has anyone ever taken that shot at you, been like, well, it's easy for you to say?
Oh yeah.
Loads. How does it
feel?
Be honest. How does it feel?
Well, okay. It did feel, before I'd done the thinking, like an attack. It did feel like, well, hang on a second. I have worked hard to be where I am. And actually, if you only knew, like, there are things that I never talk about or write about that will never be in the public domain because they involve other people. Okay. So I just can't, I choose not to go there. And then I read more about it and talked more about it. And it's absolutely true that I have had massive advantages in my life. And that's a fact, as is the fact that I've worked hard as well. But I did have those advantages. So for me to deny that feels really wrong and actually irresponsible. Yeah. And now I feel like there's a certain dialogue that is had around women where I feel women are more often challenged for talking about their personal experiences than men are. And maybe you can tell me that. No,
I think you're telling the truth. I think I would agree. I'd agree.
And I don't like that.
That's crazy. That's so true.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Like, I don't like the fact that I feel as though I constantly have to show my battle scars and my wounds and my sadness in order to earn the right to a platform from which I can speak and write as a woman. Now, there are certain white, middle-class, privately educated men out there who never have to do that apologizing. They never have to do that caveating. People are just like, oh, they're quirky.
But they all say it with they will, like, the quote is like, say it with your chest. They will say it with their chest. They'll talk about their success. They'll give advice. They don't caveat anything. It's like, this is how you do it. And it's funny because I sat here with, maybe shouldn't say their name, but I sat here with a young lady who's very successful. Yeah. And she was educated at maybe the best university in the land.
Grace Beverley.
Yes.
I heard it. I listened to it. Yeah. And I thought she dealt with it very elegantly.
And why has she got to deal with it elegantly? I sit here, I think, like, the point I was trying to make to her is, like, why is it that you and Grace have to like do this like assault course of words and caveats? Because someone will say in the comment section, oh, it's very easy but with my male guests, no, they don't do that. And they don't have to. And they don't get attacked.
Can I ask you an off-topic personal question? Yes. About race?
But on the record.
On the record, totally on the record. Yeah. So I felt really conflicted on social media around Black Lives Matter and the horrendous, tragic, to my mind, illegal death of George Floyd. And I was like, but I felt like I don't need to post on Instagram that I think killing Black people is bad. Yeah. Like, surely that's a given.
No, Elizabeth. Silence is violence. I'm taking the piss.
I know, but I do. So I would love to hear from you, like, what's my responsibility? Because I did post a black square, because I was like, if I don't post a black square, then that feels wrong to me as well.
I mean, but this is a huge issue with society because we're thinking in such binary bullshit ways about these really complex, sensitive, systemic issues. It's in that moment, and the reason I did this post on Instagram, it went viral and like everyone's seen it, and I've talked about this podcast multiple times, mainly because I just had Ant Middleton on, so I've talked about it there. But obviously, when we watch a black man get killed for 9 minutes asking for his mum, any sort of morally sound human being on planet Earth will feel a bunch of emotions. I watched it and I didn't say anything for 3 days because I just didn't want to see that fucking clip again. No. I didn't want to talk about it. I watched that clip and just thought, oh, I felt sick to my stomach and I was angry and I was sad and I just didn't want to. And then in my DMs, I've got all these DMs from people, black people going, you've not stood with us, you fucking butt. And I'm just thinking, oh, fuck off. Like, do you know what I mean? This isn't, and in those moments, what social media and the world will try and do is it will try and make you fit exactly into a camp that think in one way, that act in one way, that use one hashtag, that post one thing, and I will not. And so in that moment, what I posted was defending white people, I guess, or everyone, and said, listen, people process things in their own ways, and that's normal, obviously. Do you agree with that statement? People process especially traumatic things in their own, everyone agrees with that sentence. And some people might be thinking, they might be reading, they might just be listening, and that's okay. And also, my last point here is, I'm going to be black forever, for my entire life. My kids will also have a little bit of black in them too, maybe a quarter black, depending on who I marry. So if you actually give a shit about changing things, your response isn't a black tile. Your response would be something much more systemic. Your response might be educating yourself and your friends. Virtue signaling on social media, that for me, that's a sign that you probably don't really care, if anything. And like, you can't say that unless you're black. I'm the only person that can say that. Like, not the only one, I mean, there's more of us. But I mean, like, I'm in my friendship group, I'm the only one that can say that. Because all of you'd be finished off. Every single one of you would get finished if you said anything like that. So, and it's a sad old world we live in, because I know everyone in this room agrees. Not one of you can say it. And that's a sad place to be, where this isn't a war of ideas. This is a war of like virtue signaling. It's not a competition of the best ideas. It's a competition of like who is correct and who is incorrect. Cancel, accept, cancel, accept. And man, oh, what a sad place. Can't even have a conversation without someone fucking going to lose your job. I'm fortunately unemployed, so no one can find me. And I don't really need the money either. So like, you know what I mean? Like the podcast sponsors, if they thought I was immoral or whatever, they could pull out. But
no, thank you. Because I think you're right. And I think compassion and nuance can't be fitted into the binary world of social media a lot of the time.
Never.
I'm really sorry, because I've completely
No, it really
taken a detour here.
I'm so annoyed at this. And the thing that annoys me more is I don't think it can be fixed. I don't know how it can be fixed. I know the way that algorithms work, and I know that they create echo chambers where everyone thinks like you. So the minute anyone in your echo chamber is not thinking like you, the way that they reinforce and reward your thought using these algorithms, you're not going to get rewarded. You're going to get attacked. And so it's fighting a losing battle. At some point, I'll probably be cancelled for something. I'm like pretty aware of this because I refuse to, I like to think in nuance. I don't think left or right. I think usually the truth is somewhere in the middle often.
Yeah.
More so than it is on the far left or the far right. And that is a dangerous way to think. It's a crime. And for me, that's a form of imprisonment, which is the inability to think and speak for yourself. That's a form of imprisonment in the same way putting someone in a cage. And for me also, not allowing people to express themselves. We've seen the harm that does. We've seen when people can't express their sexuality, they kill themselves more. So I was thinking, I was like, I will not allow myself to be imprisoned, my thought to be imprisoned, and my expression to be put in prison, because I actually think the net impact of that is much worse than just someone writing some shit in the comment section about me. I'd like to be a free thinker.
What do you think of Piers Morgan?
Sometimes he hits, sometimes he misses. He's a bit of a narcissist in some ways. Sometimes he's like right, sometimes he's wrong. Sometimes I agree, sometimes I don't.
Yeah.
Shouldn't be deplatformed. We can all scream at him, but he's not a racist. He's not doing it. He's not like encouraging people to like hurt each other. He's not encouraging harm or violence. He has an opinion which some people disagree with sometimes. Talking about Sharon Osbourne, she's been chucked off her show for defending Piers Morgan. And I watched the clip last night of what she said, and all she goes is, what has he said that's racist? And the host responds to him, it's not what he said. He hasn't said anything racist. It's just his, basically his attitude towards the situation. Oh, come on, fucking hell.
But do you do you think that because we've had millennia of things one way, the transitional phase is always going to have to be extreme as the pendulum swings to one end, and so that it can then stabilize in the center, and we're just living through an age of transition?
I like to think that sometimes, but then I know how algorithms work, and I think that the algorithms are reinforcing our echo chambers. Every single day, my algorithm is telling me if I'm right or if I'm wrong, and it's based on groupthink. It's like these pockets of groupthink. And the other thing is like, just when I think about it logically, I think, I read this quote one day, and it was like, if your opinions and beliefs almost identically resemble the people around you, then they're not your opinions and beliefs. And I thought about that a lot, and I was like,
that's
this
really
is
interesting.
True.
Yeah.
If we want to get like really deep about this,
yeah,
most of our beliefs and opinions come from the society we live in. And you've only got to go back 5,000, 10,000 years and see the barbaric things we did that we thought were morally sound and okay, to realize that in fact, our opinions and beliefs are mainly given to us by society. In fact, good and bad, if you look at what we did 100 years ago, if you look at what happened in certain parts of the world in history, those people thought they were good, and that was the right thing to do. And so what are my opinions today? The majority, what social media and the world has told me is the correct thing to do. How moral are we? If we felt completely moral when we used to like behead people and kill black people and chase, we thought that was good fight.
Go on crusades. So
yeah, it's a lot. Maybe a topic. Anyway, right. What was I in
Failure.
this book? Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Point number 2 of fail philosophy. I lost my way in this book. Just quickly. Yeah. Got the list here as well. So point number 2 in your book is you are not your anxious brain. I think you've talked about that.
Yes, that's
so
the
we'll move on.
Point.
Almost everything almost everyone feels they have failed in their 20s.
I mean, not you. Okay, so Stephen Bartlett, I'm pretty
Still.
sure. Do you think you failed in your 20s? Probably personally. Sorry.
Multiple. No.
Yeah.
It's a good question, actually. Multiple times, yeah. Started my first business at 18. It was clearly a failure. Left that when I was 20 years old. Failed in loads of relationships. Fail every day in business. Not the big, momentous failures, other than my business, that one would assert. But no, I failed. Probably more than anybody, to be fair.
I think that's so great to hear.
Yeah.
And also, I think that a lot of people struggle in their 20s, particularly in this day and age, because of the curse of comparison and because we live in a culture of curated perfection where you're constantly comparing yourself to your peers' filtered appearance on Instagram and the life that they seem to be living. So we're comparing our insides with everyone else's projection of their outsides.
Exactly, yeah.
And for many people, although I know not you, but for many people, it's the first time that they've come out of full-time education and come out of a system of exam and reward.
Yeah.
And there is no exam that you can sit to show that you're being a good grown-up. So you feel quite lost. Plus, piling on top of that, the pressure to find your passion, to like make a career for yourself, but also to earn enough to pay your rent, living in house shares, like just trying to make your way and trying to forge your identity in this day and age. It's just so hard to do all that at once. And then you're like, oh, and I should be having like a thriving personal life. And I should either be in a long-term relationship or having one-night stands and making Footloose and Fancy Free and drinking loads. And then at the weekend making vegan brownies because I got to watch what I eat and all of that sort of stuff. And it's exhausting. And so really what I wanted to say in that failure principle was that so many people come on podcasts and say that they feel they failed at their 20s. And I think a lot of us fall into the trap, and I did too, of believing that we had to have our life sorted out by then. And actually your 20s are a decade of transition, of discovering who you are, of grinding up the spices of life in your pestle and mortar. And the older you get, my experience has been the more you know yourself and the more you know what you want to do. And that's where success lies. I've had so many more opportunities after leaving my 20s behind in the rearview mirror.
Wow. Nothing else to add. You've really thought about that. You've written a book on it. So, yeah. Number 4, breakups are not a tragedy. Your ex-partner has taught you something.
Yeah.
One of the things you said, which I thought was really, really powerful, is that a relationship ending doesn't mean that it failed.
That's it in a nutshell. Like, I've had countless failed relationships, and it sucks. Like heartbreak, there is no pain like heartbreak.
Oh, I hate it.
It's the worst, isn't it? It's the worst. It really, I totally relate. And I now realize that I learned something very instructive from each one of those relationships, and from the fact that they ended. It taught me something that I needed to know about myself, and I realized that love that was ready for me, I didn't need to fight to convince it. Like it would meet me where I was, and it might not come in the package that I expected, and it didn't. I met Justin on a Hinge date that I almost didn't go on. And it doesn't immediately feel like the thing that you thought you wanted, because actually that hasn't worked out for you. So it's always better to make a different choice, I think. So yeah, it's just about how, although relationships feel that they might be life ending at the time, they never are. When they end, they never are. And often someone has been sent to you, whether it be a friendship, a work colleague, or a lover, to teach you a lesson that you needed to know. And when a relationship ends, it's because you've been taught that lesson.
God, it's a shitty lesson to learn. And also like when you go through a breakup, as you've described there, not letting it end is part, in my experience, of the reason why something new doesn't start.
Yes. Oh, that's yes. That's what Oprah would call a teachable moment.
Is it?
Yeah. You need to create the space for the new thing to come in, which means leaving something behind.
What I talk about a little bit before about quitting being just as much of a skill in an art form as starting. We glamorize starting, but there's a real talent, not yet. There's a real skill to knowing how to quit, how to move forward, because starting is great, but the thing you do before you start something is to quit something else. And that is, I mean, just from reading your books and stuff and listening to the interviews you've done, not appreciated enough, because it involves uncertainty. You're throwing yourself off a cliff sometimes and building the paraglider as you fly. Yes,
and we're also taught to avoid feelings of sadness, like good vibes only. And you're like, no, actually, sometimes you need to be in that sadness. You need to feel that discomfort to understand what life really is. Life is texture. Life is all sorts of emotions. And when we feel grief because a relationship has ended or because we've lost someone, that, as that famous quote says, is the price you pay for love. And in a way, it's a beautiful thing to feel because it's a signifier of how much you love.
It just sucks though.
I know.
You know what I mean? It just suck. Like I just, giving people advice on heartbreak, I feel like it's such a, for me, when I'm like in my DMs and someone sent me something about, I've just broken up with this person and whatever.
Yeah.
It's such an intoxicating force, like heartbreak, that I'm like, my words aren't going to help you. You just basically have to tough it out and to try as much as you can in believing that your future will be better.
Yeah.
You'll get past this.
And believing that rejection is protection. If you're rejected, that person is not for you. either because they've been stupid enough to fucking reject you or because action is character. And if they've dumped you, it's like, well, do you really want to trust that person for the rest of your life? No.
Is that true? And I'm playing devil's advocate here intentionally because I actually don't know the answer. If you get rejected, is that person not right for you?
Yes, I think, but I suppose it depends on the nature of the rejection. Like, it has to be a serious one. It can't just be an unread WhatsApp message that you're interpreting as a rejection.
They like full on rejected.
Yeah, I think listen, I don't know if it's true or not, but it's what I choose to believe because it makes me feel better about life to believe.
I think by the definition you gave of like, well, they didn't appreciate you.
Yeah.
What about like, how, if we think about taking responsibility in those situations and we say, okay, my relationship with this guy that I loved ended because I have problems. Because when I say problems, it's like I have jealousy or I have things that I haven't dealt with. Is that also, it's hard for people to do that.
Yeah.
Blame is super easy in heartbreak.
You're so right. And that's where personal responsibility comes in.
Yeah.
And so in the immediate aftermath of a breakup, you're going to probably feel heartbroken and really sad. Once you've processed that, then your responsibility is to understand what part you played in the dynamic. But for those first few weeks, do whatever you need to do to get through. And if you need to blame someone and just keep saying rejection is protection and like, what a loser, do it, because you just need to get through that initial phase of awfulness. My last serious breakup, I was in such a dark place. I Googled how long does it take to get over heartbreak. It's like, actually, that was a really good 6 weeks. I did feel better. It was like a manageable length of time. And I was like, okay, I'm going to feel miserable for 6 weeks. And once you commit to the acceptance of that, it becomes a lot easier to deal with because you're not struggling against feeling it. You're like, well, I'm on track because I'm now week 4. So yeah, I'm still feeling miserable. That's okay. And it somehow makes you feel better.
No, I get that. Yeah.
Are you post breakup right now?
Not post breakup. No. I'm post something ending.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No, it wasn't. It was. I consider it to be a choice that I made.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's not necessarily the best example. For me, the real significant heartbreak moments I had were all when I was younger, really. And and it just always sucked. But obviously I've got a lot of friends that are going through breakups and stuff, and it's always difficult to give them advice because their head is gone. Like there's no way I can describe it. There's no sense there when in matters of love. It's just all. So yeah, just asking them to tough it out, I think is all I've ever got in terms of advice.
Well, now you can give them a copy of
Philosophy.
Well, there you
go. Point number 7. When we choose to share our vulnerabilities is when we feel most satisfaction.
Most connection, I think, is what I said. Well, I don't.
Why does it say satisfaction on my list?
I don't know. I like that too, because you probably do feel personal satisfaction. It's like, but when we choose to be open about our vulnerabilities, that's paradoxically when we find the most strength and the source of the most real connections with other people.
Amen.
Yeah. And that's something that I have genuinely learned through the podcast. The first season of the podcast I came from a very traditional newspaper journalist background. So for me, it was like, I'm interviewing my guest. I will ask the questions and I will listen, and then I will ask another question. And it was only as time went on that I felt more comfortable sharing my own experiences. And whenever I did that, I had such an incredible feedback loop of just amazing people sharing their stories and their vulnerabilities, and also saying that they felt less alone because I shared mine. And really, that's what my entire life was about, ultimately, is connection. And so I really want to encourage people not to be scared of opening up about the things that they perceive as their weaknesses, because so often what you think of as your most personal shame turns out to have most universal resonance. And that was certainly my experience talking about fertility and miscarriage and divorce. Actually, that's where I've had the greatest impact, I think. And I'm so grateful for that.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think vulnerability, in terms of why it has such wide resonance, why do you think that is?
Because I think that when we're vulnerable, we're being real. and we're letting our masks slip, and you're seeing a glimpse of who the authentic person is. And there's something just absolutely quintessentially human about that. So it's a human recognizing another human. It's a human recognizing another human beneath the pretense. And I think it also reassures people because, as we've been talking about, in this culture that we live in, which is so defined by social media and how you appear and the currency of perfection, again, it's such a relief. It makes you feel like you can breathe. If someone's like, oh God, I'll tell you about today. I sat in bed in my pajamas eating hummus direct from the tub because I felt really down. That's an act of singular generosity to someone else who can then have the space to talk about how they're feeling.
Is there any such thing as too vulnerable or oversharing? I don't think there's any such thing as too vulnerable. I do think there is such a thing as oversharing. And I only say, I make that distinction because oversharing is about telling your story to others. And obviously there are right and appropriate times and places to do that. I'm not advocating that someone goes into work and just starts sobbing at their desk. There's definitely a time and place for that, but I wouldn't suggest doing that every single day. Like, to protect yourself, you need to find a safe space that you can share those vulnerabilities with, and then build up your strength and your confidence and realize what it is that you do want to speak more publicly about. Because I don't think that you can share with everyone immediately after you've experienced pain. Like, that's too soon. Mm-hmm. And also you can't trust everyone to honor what you're sharing. So I don't think you can be too vulnerable, but it's a question of choosing the things that you then take your vulnerability and share from, and who you share them with. That was such an ineloquent way of saying that. No, it was good. No, it's a really...
It's basically about boundaries.
I completely... I was thinking when you were saying it, because I remember having a conversation with one of my team members in New York one day where I was trying to... the issue you have when you're a CEO is someone might have some struggles, some mental health issues, or they might have some problems going on at home. How do you tell them, without being a dick, to not broadcast that every day to their team below them, but also knowing the importance of speaking and expression is part of the cure? So I remember having a conversation with one particular person and just saying to them, like, the key thing is like knowing the right outlet for that.
Yes.
And what you've described it as is like the safe space.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And that can be a different safe space for different people. It can be your therapist. It can be your sibling. It can be the in-house therapy that your workplace hopefully provides. Yeah. But I also think that it goes back to what we were saying earlier. If a team leader is in that position, I think it's about being able to bring your authentic whole self to work, but being able to show that you're not defined by the things that have gone wrong. Or if you are defined by it, you're defined in a good way, in that you're choosing to lean into this particular feeling because it's going to teach you something that you need to know. That's the sort of responsibility of a leader, I think. It's not to pretend that everything's fine and to wear this mask of the perfect boss. It's to be someone who acknowledges that life can be tough and who shares what they're going to do about that. I think we need to have confidence in our leaders that they have an idea about what to do with it when they're sharing it in the workplace.
And this is the problem with Matt Hancock being such a robot, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, don't even get me started on that.
Guy, I don't know if he experiences emotion. I probably shouldn't say that because that's unfair, but I look at this guy and I think, do you understand what people are feeling? I don't think you do. It's
the problem with so many politicians. I was so inspired by Angela Merkel recently because she apologized for having overturned a lockdown ruling over Easter. She's like, I'm really sorry I got that wrong. I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. You know what I mean? Thank you. Yeah. Just quickly to go back to oversharing.
And Jacinda.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Jacinda is, we both need to get her on our respective podcasts. We really do. Oversharing as it pertains to women, just very quickly. I think women are often shamed into silence. And I've definitely experienced that. Someone being like, why do you talk about all this stuff? Why don't you keep it private? And I'm like, precisely so that I attack that kind of narrative, because I feel that so many people feel shame and stigma over things they don't need to feel it for. And it's because people stay silent. So I think it's also a bit of a stick with which to beat women.
I completely agree. Yeah. Is there anything you wouldn't share that doesn't involve someone else?
Oh, that's a great question.
Because every time you hit a wall in terms of what you're willing to share, it's because you say, well, that involves someone else, so I won't share. But is there anything about yourself that you wouldn't share that doesn't involve anybody else?
I am still determined to be a mother. When I get pregnant, I don't think I would share that publicly because I would feel fearful and anxious. And also because I have such respect for women who are going through fertility issues that I would just never do that. But that involves another person, the one that I'm carrying. So I'm not sure whether the parameters of your question really fit around, but that is one thing that I've thought about. Yeah. So that's quite a heavy answer.
That's a really interesting point there about you wouldn't want to share it because you've probably resonated. Well, of course you have. You've resonated with a lot of women who are going through that same experience, and you've probably got a lot of those people in your audience. So for some of those people, it might. I mean, humans are humans. The news that when you have your own child might feel like shit to them.
Definitely. And I respect that because I've been there and I felt it and I feel it still. And I totally understand that.
You feel it as in, it's like a jealousy it's like an envy or like of women that have a child or that.
Yeah. I mean, it's never personally directed. It's just a sort of envy or yearning would be a better word for an experience that thus far has been denied me. And I think lockdown and the pandemic has been so hard for all women, and it's been incredibly hard for people homeschooling their children. But for people who don't have children and desperately long for that, for people who are going through fertility treatment that's been delayed by the pandemic, for people who've experienced miscarriages during lockdown, as I have, it's incredibly painful to see parents complaining about homeschooling and how difficult that is to have these children that they have to homeschool. That's a very difficult thing. Now, no one is to blame for that. I take personal responsibility for my reaction, and that's where I need to curate my social media feed. That is absolutely not the fault of the parent in question. They should totally do that and lean into it, and that is completely right and appropriate. That's up to me to take that responsibility on. It's just that I know I wouldn't feel comfortable shouting it from the rooftops because I know how fucking painful and traumatic it is to go through. I really do.
Listen, so your vulnerability and your honesty is really moving, and it's very, very rare.
Oh, thank you.
I can't even begin to imagine how many people, women, you've helped because of your vulnerability. You probably don't even get to see it. So I want to thank you on behalf of all those people. As I was reading about your story and your journey, I was like really taken aback by how open and honest you're willing to be, because you don't need to be, right? I'm sure that as you've described in some of the things you've written, you've discovered that it's actually really almost paradoxically quite a selfish thing to be so selfless in that way. But I think you're just remarkable, and I think what you've written and the work you've produced is phenomenal. And I just wanted to thank you so much for coming here today and being as vulnerable with me as you have been across all of your other work. It's truly we're fortunate as a society to have people like you in it who are willing to help. So thank you.
Thank you for giving me a safe space and for making me feel like I can be vulnerable with you. I have loved this conversation so much. I really, truly have. And I love that I've been able to swear. But I also love what you do and what you stand for. And honestly, your Instagram page, I don't know how you have so much wisdom at such a young age. Oh. But we will find your perfect match.
Please do. Your book, Philosophy, it's everywhere. I actually went down to St. Pancras yesterday just to get it. Got it off the shelf. I think.
Excellent.
Yeah. Where else can people find you, and what else are you working on that they should check out? The podcast as well, How to Fail.
Yes.
That's a smash hit book, Sunday Times bestseller.
Yes. I wrote another book before that called How to Fail, originally. Everything I've ever learned from things going wrong, which is my memoir, part manifesto. The podcast, available on all podcast platforms. I'm on social media at Eliza B. Day. And I've got a novel out. My new novel is out in September, and it's called Magpie. And
what's it about?
It is, okay, I have to be a bit vague because there's a massive twist in it.
Okay.
And it's a sort of psychological, twisty novel. But it's about a lot of what we've been talking about today. It's about dysfunctional motherhood and what happens when you think you know what you want and then your dreams come true and then it just turns out to be a total illusion.
Oh, wow.
Have I sold it?
Is it a thriller?
Yeah, it is. It's basically a thriller driven by kind of warped characters.
Okay, interesting.
And I'm obsessed with magpies. That's why it's called Magpie.
Okay.
I don't want to salute magpies.
Sorry?
Do you salute magpies?
I don't know. I don't think I know. No one ever told me that tale. But thank you so much again. And it means well to me that you came and made the time for this today. And I'm sure that you've imparted a ton of important inspiration on our listeners. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
To get into those spaces. Why do we pretend we're not doing that? We know we're doing that.
I disagree with that. You're talking about two types of elite spaces. Elite space of elite universities.
Yeah.
And you're talking about the elite space of derivatives trading. There's the real economy, where entrepreneurs do their work. Then there's the first derivative, which is the banking system. And then there's the second derivative, which is rates traders like yourself, right? These are places that normal people don't want to end up. Most normal people who grow up in normal households don't wake up one day and say, I want to be a rates trader on a double derivative of the economy making bets. Most people want to start a business that employs people and they want to grow that business and be successful.
Do you think that starting a business is a realistic high success probability chance of ordinary poor people becoming rich?
I know that economies thrive when entrepreneurs are active, and it's not just the entrepreneurs, they create
Is that a thing that our viewers can do, and most of them will end up rich?
You only need 1% to improve the whole economy.
There's a really interesting stat that says globally around 65% of ultra high net worth individuals are self-made. Approximately 19% primarily inherited their wealth, and about 16% inherited wealth but significantly grew it through their own ventures. So 65% of the ultra high net worth individuals globally are self-made. Does that not mean that if I want to become an ultra high net worth person, it's going to come down to...
Listen, we are just come off the back of the golden age of capitalism, when ordinary people like my dad, I grew up in Ilford. It's in East London. It's a very immigrant area. Most of my friends I grew up with come from Pakistani, Indian immigrant backgrounds. They came over with nothing. They worked really hard. They made money. They had their own assets. We had a period where ordinary people could make money and could make wealth. So obviously we are now in a period where there are rich people who made money during that period. But it's over now.
I'm seeing ordinary people making money all the time.
Okay, so you're telling our viewers they're idiots. Why are they not making money?
I'm not telling anyone they're an idiot. I'm saying
if it's that easy, okay, all right, fine. Go and buy Dan's book, read it, and become a millionaire. Because Dan thinks it's easy to become a millionaire by being an entrepreneur. But I suspect, having not been an entrepreneur, that most of the people who've read your book are not millionaires.
Everything you've touched has turned to gold. You turned yourself to academia, you got an amazing qualification. You turned yourself to banking, you became $2 million a year. You turned yourself to being a writer, you become Sunday Times bestseller. You turn yourself to content creating, you get 800,000 followers. And now you sit there after all of that evidence and say, oh no, it's all over, guys. It's all, I'm smart enough to do it, but you guys are not smart enough to do it.
If you think you can teach, you've got your book. If you think you can teach,
so you say that you're smart enough, but they're not smart enough.
I wonder if we do have a bit of an education problem at the heart of this, because I was thinking about your sister, and I was like, right, if I was the CEO of Gary's sister, what would I do?
Yeah.
There's two things I do right now. The first is, okay, what marketplace is really valuing an ability to write in an impactful way? I go, right, you need to start an Instagram page, because I've seen what happened with Jay Shetty. This guy's pulling in tens of millions a year because he took nice words that were motivational, poetic, put them on there. And I go, also YouTube needs to get to YouTube, because if she can talk like you, then she's going to do exceptionally well on YouTube as well. But there's not going to be a great economy necessarily for someone who's doing poetry in many other places other than what I'm saying is the internet. But in school, we don't teach this. There's no YouTube class for YouTube. And it's such a huge part of the economy. I mean, you have seen that. There's been this decentralization of media where the megaphone was owned.
It's growing at 20% a year.
The megaphone was
people
owned.
watching, start a YouTube, become an entrepreneur.
But it's the internet, isn't it?
It's easy.
I'm not saying it's easy.
Do you think it works for most people, Stephen?
For most people, no, it doesn't work. It
there's
doesn't
an
work.
education
Why are
gap.
we pretending it does?
But what I would say is if in school we taught young kids a couple of new things and we stopped teaching them about Pythagoras' theorem, which by the way ChatGPT is going to do for you with your eyes closed, and we taught them about the new economy of the internet, about the ability to start a shop, and it's crazy that the school system was designed in such a way where they put me in exclusion unit because I was so preoccupied with doing business deals at school. Yeah. And my headmaster came on national TV on What I Lied to You and said, yeah, we unexpelled him eventually because he made the school so much money. But the system was punishing me for entrepreneurship, and it wasn't teaching me anything about the new economy, which is technology.
Steve, do you think it matters if the percentage of young people who are able to achieve financial freedom and have a family is shrinking?
So do I think it matters if the percentage of young people that are able to are you saying attain wealth and have a family?
Yeah, achieve financial freedom and have a family.
I think that's a really big problem.
Listen,
I think that's a really big problem.
I agree. I know. Listen, and I know you've got this podcast, and I know you inspire young people, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that you inspire young people to go out and work hard and try and achieve something. But I'm an economist, and what I see is the percentage of young people who make it shrinking. And I think if you combine those two things, you reach a really dangerous place, because we go and tell the young people it's there for you to start a business, and at the same time, the number of people who make it is 10%, 5%, 2%. 1%. And there will always be that one person who makes it. There will always be that Stephen Bartlett in every country in the world who's making it through. You know what I'm saying? But the systematic issue matters, Stephen.
Can we not change the education system so that when I was 16 and they threw me in the exclusion unit, which could so easily have made me think that I was a failure, because my brothers Jason went to LSE and became very much like you and now works in my company, managing my investments. He, in that education system, was rewarded. So I sat there as a kid thinking, rich and successful, my older brother Jason, because he can do maths. And I thought, I'm going to be a failure because I like this thing called entrepreneurship and I have ADHD, so I can't pay attention in lessons. What I'm saying is if the education system was designed in such a way where people like me, who were entrepreneurial, who were interested in the internet and couldn't stop playing video games, were clapped for and said, oh my God, double down on that. I think the net benefit, when you think about what the backbone of the economy is, which is entrepreneurs starting businesses, would be profound for this country here. Yeah. But I believe there needs to be such a radical overhaul of our education system if we want to stand a chance of capitalizing on what the economy is today.
Yeah, I think you could probably change the education system in a lot of ways that could improve it, but you're kind of changing the education system on the Titanic. What my perspective is, I can tell you with a very, very high rate of certainty, if you don't fix this problem of the wealth being sucked out of the middle class, 95, 98% of people will be in poverty in this country in 70 years.
I agree with you. This is the thing. I agree that you can't have a group of people at the very top that own all the assets and all the money, or else, it's going to come from somewhere. Yeah. And I remember the day that I printed off the job seekers allowance form when I was stealing Chicago Town pizzas 10 years ago in my room in Moss Side in Manchester. I remember what it feels like to not have my parents speaking to me, have all these CCJ letters and bailiff letters on my desk, and really have no answer on how to get out of this situation, to the point that I was like shoplifting. I'd call the Just Eat driver and then try and persuade him just to give me the food. That was 10 years ago for me. So I've not forgotten those years of my life. So I understand what it is to be in that situation. And on an individual level, I need some answers, because I'm not going to wait for these people in fucking the parliament to fix my life for me. So I need some individual answers. And then I do also care about the bigger picture. So I'm not like here as someone that just wants to accrue loads of wealth myself. Of course, listen, let's be honest. There's not many human beings that wouldn't like more money. So I try and acknowledge that bias. But the big issue I have is how. And from my personal experience, as someone that now employs hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people here in London, up in Manchester, in our offices, there are a set of things that would make me leave this country if it became increasingly less friendly to entrepreneurs. I reckon if we come back here in 5 years' time, I reckon I'll employ 500 more people in the UK. And actually, as you look around this room, you can see the age of them. These are young people. there are things you could do to make me not do that.
I mean, it's probably worth pointing out that we're not taxing wealth and you're leaving the country anyway, Stephen.
No, I haven't left the country.
Okay, you're going to stay.
I'm a tax resident here. I pay my taxes here. And I have zero intent in changing that. I'm also on Dragon, so we're investing a lot of money in UK businesses. Yeah.
But listen, I want to tax only high levels of wealth. Only high levels of wealth. And listen, don't get me wrong, I understand very rich people will complain. And very rich people will say, just like they did in Dickens, I'm going to throw my businesses, I'm going to throw my taxes, my businesses and my factories into the sea. Stephen, your viewers are here. Listen, Stephen, your viewers are here. You are a very wealthy person. They are paying 20, 30, 40, 50%. You should be paying your fair share, Stephen. You should.
I think that I should pay more tax, especially when I don't think my kids should benefit from my wealth. And maybe this is a controversial opinion, but I actually don't. I don't think I should be able to pass down my assets to my children.
You can't. It's 40% tax.
I think it should be more.
It's 40, yeah.
Let's not pretend rich people don't successfully pass their assets to their children.
I'm just telling you now. Yeah. I think I'd be robbing my children of something. From the background that I came from, if my child gets gets tens of millions, let's say even, when I die, I don't think that should happen.
But I agree. People say, when I talk about my sister, people are like, why don't you just give your sister a load of money? Listen, my sister works hard. She's a smart person. She works hard. She produces good work. I want to live in a society where people like my sister are able to support themselves with the work that they do, but we're destroying that society.
But who would pay her?
The customers. The situation.
So you want her to start a business?
She is a business.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want people like her to be taxed less, so that what I want is ordinary working people to be taxed less so they have more money in their pocket. Listen, the reason we had the thriving art scene in the 60s is because we had a thriving middle class that could go and buy the new fashions and buy the new records. And then that created this thriving art scene. Now we have a middle class which is struggling to pay the bills, so they can't buy stuff. My sister makes theatre shows. The only people who go to the theatre are rich people now. But back in the day, theatre was something that was more accessible. You want the arts. I've got a mate who's a fashion designer, right? Nowadays, there's all of the business is super fast, super cheap, super disposable fashion, or unbelievably expensive high end, because that's the economy we've created. You go to Japan, which is a less unequal society. The restaurants are good quality restaurants for ordinary people, because a good capitalist society will produce things for the people with money.
In the case of theatre, where have the theatre consumers moved to? Where are they getting their entertainment now?
Well, what you have is a very rich group of people who will still go to theatre and they will pay a lot. But then you have a large group of people who are relatively cash scarce and they will try to get their entertainment in cheaper ways, of course. You know what I mean?
They're spending their time watching your YouTube channel.
Well, exactly, my YouTube channel, which is free, by the way.
Yeah, but you get paid from it. You get the YouTube.
To be honest, it's only in the last couple of months that I started to make any money because I don't do my own editing. So, and you'll know, but in the first few years, you're paying yourself to do it. You know what I mean? I think people sometimes massively overestimate the amount of money.
This is entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs go through 2, 3, 4, 5 years worth of struggle to get to the point where they're successful. And it feels pretty horrific that you say, oh, finally, when I make it, you take it. And then the advisors to entrepreneurs...
Just £10 million is quite a lot of money. So, you can be worth £9 million and not be paying anything more.
But what if I just raise $1 million for investment into my company?
Yeah.
But that then, like I do, if I'm raising money all the way along and my investors are saying, I'm sorry, I don't invest in the UK economy because it's wealth taxes and all that sort of stuff, it's anti-wealth, and then I just have to move my company overseas.
Well, I want to create a situation where the UK consumer is so strong that you have to invest in the UK.
You don't have to be here to sell to them.
If you're looking to take the next step in your tech career, you'll want to hear about our sponsor, Intuit. I've always believed that if you want to do your best work, you have to put yourself in the right environment. You want to work with the best. You want to work with the best technologists who are leading innovation with data and AI. And this is what you can expect at Intuit. They're growing their tech careers, building an AI-driven expert platform that connects people to all the money they deserve. The cutting-edge tech they are developing in products like TurboTax, Credit Karma, QuickBooks, and MailChimp are helping around 100 million customers and businesses put more money in their pockets. Having a mission-driven culture is something I really align with because it's all about solving complex customer problems with rapid experimentation to move faster. Quite similar to the culture I want to foster at my companies. If this sounds like you and you want to grow your tech career working alongside the best, check out intuit.com/careers. They also offer hybrid work and a very inclusive culture with offices in Atlanta, New York, San Diego, the Bay Area, Toronto, and around the world. Head over to intuit/careers to explore their opportunities. Quick one, I want to talk to you about our sponsor, Whoop, a business I'm also an investor in. And if you follow me on Instagram, you've probably noticed that recently I've picked up running, which I'm very much enjoying. And it started out as a challenge, but it's now evolved into something I do almost daily. It is one of those things that's pushing me to be better every single day. But here's the thing, to me, progress isn't just about pushing harder, it's also about training in a smarter way, which is where my Whoop comes in. Whoop doesn't just track my workouts, it tells me how ready my body is to take them on before I've even started the workout. A few years ago, Whoop ran a study called Project PR, and it found that runners who adjusted their training based on their recovery scores improved their 5K times by an average of 2 minutes and 40 seconds, while reducing injury risk by over 30%. And they did it while training less. So if you're looking for this type of guidance when it comes to your training, head over to join.whoop.com/CEO and get a 30-day trial with zero commitment. That's join.whoop.com/CEO. Let me know how you get on. So do we all agree on this premise, though, that Gary's saying, which is the ultra rich, which we can classify as being worth more than you're saying?
We say 10 million is the line that we campaign for.
Okay, we think that they should pay a greater share of the tax. And then if you agree with that premise, the question then becomes, yes, but how?
Yeah.
And what's the mechanic?
Well, they already do. 1% pay 30%.
I want to be clear. That's the top 1% of taxpayers, which is not the top 1% of richest people.
Mind you,
This is ridiculous.
I'm also not necessarily saying what's fair. I'm saying what's practically possible, right? So, like, you could come up with the world's most fair on the back of a napkin. This is what's fair. But whether you can implement it is a very difficult thing. The problem is wealth is completely mobile now. It's really, you can live and work from anywhere.
It's the houses, Dan.
Yeah.
It's land. Is that mobile? You can't rip the country out of the sea.
There's very few. I've never met any seriously wealthy people who own a lot of houses.
You honestly think that the entire housing stock of the UK is not valuable?
Yeah, no, it is. But
somebody owns it.
78% is owned by baby boomers. They just own. They've bought a house in 1992 and they own the house.
Personally, I think that house ownership, especially when you consider mortgages, is relatively unequally distributed. That is, by the way, the most equally distributed.
Young people have now had
the commercial property, the land, the natural resources.
Owned by pension funds.
So the viewers own it, do they?
No, they're owned by, if they own a pension fund, most of those commercial
properties. And what is the distribution of pensions?
If you have a look at
what is the distribution of pensions? What percentage of pensions is owned by the top 1%?
I wouldn't know off the top of my head, but with pensions. But I know that obviously wealth concentrates at the top. But here's the one thing to keep in mind: wealthy group are not necessarily a static group. There was a study of the richest people in 1900, and most of those families are poor today, or they've gone down in value today. If the richest people in 1900 had have just simply kept their wealth, there'd be 16,000 more billionaires. But they don't. In wealth management, in banks, they have this thing called the succession planning. So succession planning is where they try and figure out how not to screw it up across generations, and they're notoriously bad at it. It's very hard to keep wealth in generations.
Down in the 20th century, we had 2 world wars and a Holocaust. That redistributed wealth. I would prefer not to have that again.
Yeah. I'm with you. I want an affluent middle class. I really do.
So where's the wealth going to come from? You're going to create it, are you?
Entrepreneurship.
Okay, we'll create it.
Economies that are friendly towards wealth creation and entrepreneurship.
No, when was the last time you had a government that wasn't, let's grow? It's not working for the people, Daniel.
No, the problem is that they need to step back. They need to let shrink.
Our viewers should keep a close eye on Donald Trump and Elon Musk because they're doing what you're asking for.
It'll be interesting to see what happens, right? It's too soon to tell.
If you were trying to grow the UK economy, would you not take America's approach? Because they seem to be much more successful at growing their economy.
Of course, when we talk about slashing of the state, they're going to use these examples like, there's this wasteful government building. Everybody wants to slash government waste. Of course, I'm not going to fight against slashing government waste. I'm from the UK, I saw the austerity years. I've seen what's happened to local services. I've seen what's happened to things like the police, like education, especially things like youth services. You slash the state, you fire a load of people, what does the state... Okay, yeah, if you can get rid of state corruption, yes, 100%. If you can get rid of state waste, 100%, this is how single mums feed their kids, Stephen. You want to stop that?
No one's saying that.
Slashing the state, I don't think it's going to work. To be honest, I think tariffs is not an uninteresting discussion. I think, yeah, of course, tax avoidance is something you need to get rid of. Really, I would like to take a step back, look at the country and say, what is the state of the country? What do people need? You know, we have a country here where the housing stock is falling apart and we're letting it fall apart because those houses are owned by ordinary people who don't have any money. If you want the country to work for ordinary people, you need ordinary people to have money. I'm always reminded of Mr. Beast. He goes to places in Africa and he spends 500 quid and he gives a kid eyesight who would have been blind for the rest of their life for 500 quid. Why are kids in Africa blind who could be given sight for 500 quid? Because they don't have any money. This is what happens when you drain your middle class. This will end up like that. You know, I've got a friend who went to India last week. He said there were people lying on the street outside with rotting limbs. You know, that is what happens when you disempower, when you take the money away from the middle class. You've got to protect the middle class. If the middle class had money, then there would be unbelievable business opportunities for selling goods and services like your business to the middle class.
So would you tax Daniel more?
I don't know if Daniel's worth more than £10 million. It sounds like he is.
He is.
I mean, I want to make it clear, right? You make 5% on your wealth. So if Daniel's worth 100 million, he's making £5 million. We're only trying to tax you 1%. I think if you are worth 100 million, you're making £5 million passive income, you can afford to pay £1 million tax a year. You're going to still keep getting rich. The truth is, even if we were to tax these billionaires 1% a year, they would still squeeze the rest out. This is not about morality. This is just cold, hard economic analysis that I have made a lot of money betting on.
So closing arguments then, chaps. I'll start with you, Gary. Yeah. Based on everything we've discussed today, I'm going to ask you to give me two perspectives, which is, if I'm a young individual in this country right now, what should I do to protect myself and my family and to feed my family? What kind of behaviours, what strategy should I adopt there? But also then from a government level, I know we have some politicians that listen because they message me. What should politicians be doing to fix the issue that we're all clearly identifying, which is the collapse of the middle class, the collapse of sort of working class people and the increased wealth of the rich?
I think what I would like young people to understand is that this gets worse. This gets much, much worse. It will get much worse relatively quickly. Poverty will increase relatively quickly. It will become increasingly difficult, almost impossible to make any serious money. Prepare yourself for that. Prepare yourself when you consider your finances, when you consider your plans for having a family. This gets worse and it's going to be really, really hard. It's going to be a big mental health problem for a lot of young people. So speak to people and understand that. My YouTube videos are there, Gary's Economics, for people to understand what's happening. After that, you've got to do all the right things. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. You've got to work hard. You've got to study the right things. I think it's a great shame we have made subjects like the arts a thing which you're not allowed. If you come from a poor background, you cannot work in the arts. I'm sorry, you can't pay the bills. You can't. So you have to go and study AI and computing and, maybe social media, although we have to be honest, social media doesn't pay for most people. You have to realize the reality of your situation. It's very, 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 very bad. But that doesn't mean you don't work. That doesn't mean you don't aspire. You work damn hard because you have to. But if you manage to make enough money to even support a family, you should be proud of yourself. That's the number one thing. But recognize this can be changed. This can be changed. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents fought for a bigger share of the pie and they got it. They got healthcare, they got education, they got housing, they got food. Our young people can have that as well, but they won't get it unless they fight for it. So I would encourage people to educate themselves, support my work, get involved politically, but also work hard, support your friends and family. Try and make money because you'll have to. If you don't play politics, I guarantee you the other side will play politics. And that means your kids and your grandkids live in poverty. So you have to do both. With regards to politicians, I've got mixed feelings about a lot of politicians. The truth is, I think a lot of politicians are very rich and ultimately they don't care. They're protected. A crisis of inequality looks fantastic from the top. And I think that's why the three of us can sit here and say things will be fine. Because for us, they will be fine. And for our kids, they will be fine. But for our viewers' kids, they won't be fine. The politicians are not going to try and save you. I'm going to try and make sure they do it, but I don't think they will. Listen, my plan is not to get concessions from politicians. My plan is to get 5 million followers on the internet and bully the politicians so that they have to give us what we need. So I would support people to get behind me, get behind my campaign, but also understand what's happening, educate your friends and your family, and just crucially to understand this is going to be a long fight. So be strong, keep your people around you, but be ready for what's to come.
I see hints in some of the things you've said recently of you going into politics yourself at some point.
Stephen, I'm in politics.
But
I'm
I mean,
in politics.
actively.
Listen, I do not want to be an MP. I do not want to be Chancellor. I do not want to be Prime Minister. If we get to a point where I feel that that is something that is achievable and it is the best way to fix this problem, I will be open to it. This is not plan A. This is not, would you like to be Prime Minister?
No,
I
fucking
suspect
thanks.
probably not, right? Like this is, I'll be honest, I am quite uncomfortable with even the level of public profile that I have at the moment, which is, it's much less than what you have, but it stresses me out. And it's weird, we spoke about it before we were shooting. I don't want to, can you imagine? I don't want to be Prime Minister. I don't want to be an MP. But I'm serious about this work that I do. And if we reach a point that I think that is the best way to do it, I will consider it. But I would much rather be able to influence the MPs from the sideline, to influence the politicians from the sidelines.
And for that person you just gave advice to, who should they be voting for?
Well, we don't have an election for... Listen, politics is not football. Politics is not football, okay? This is not about I'm Labour, I'm Conservative, I'm Republican, I'm Democrat. You're losing your houses here. You're losing your houses. Your kids will be in poverty. And you're going to see both Trump and the Republicans and Keir Starmer and Labour, who are supposed to be on the opposite side of the political spectrum, they will both fail because they will not take action on growing wealth inequality. And I'll be right on that. Bring me back in a few years, I'll be right on that. And that shows you it's not about... I think this factionalism is unbelievably damaging to our societies, especially in the US, where there's so much hatred behind it, where suddenly I'm on this side, you're on that side. Look, we're going to shake hands after this. I've got nothing wrong. We will, there's no hatred here. But if you allow yourself to be divided from half of your country, and we're seeing it growing, tensions, racial tensions, gender tensions. If you allow yourself to be divided, they will win. They will win. So you need to vote for whoever is going to protect your houses. And if you want to know who that is, come and check Gary's economics before the election, and I will tell you who it's going to be.
Daniel.
Nice. Well,
closing arguments, personal and social.
A few things.
Sure.
I read Gary's book and it's brilliant. And regardless of whether you actually like economics, it's a brilliant story. It's a really good. I read it in about 2 or 3 days, and it'll eventually be a good movie as well. I agree with a lot of what Gary's saying. There is a collapse of the middle class, and it probably will get worse. And the traditional middle class jobs that came out of the back of the industrial age, mature industrial revolution system, those are collapsing, and it's globalizing. We're seeing technology move opportunities all over the world. And wealth inequality, it has a cause. Wealth inequality itself is a scoreboard, and there's a cause for what led up to wealth inequality. And the cause, in my mind, is technology. Technology is moving those opportunities around, and it's changing things. We already have big governments. We have huge amounts of taxes. We're at record levels of taxes. Wealth has never been more mobile. It's not about what's fair. It's about what you can practically get away with. It's about what you can actually implement. And it's going to be very, very, as Gary said, it's going to be very, very, very hard to tax people who have digital businesses, who can live and work from anywhere. I know that firsthand, that it's incredibly mobile. With that said, at a macro level, big picture, we do know that there is a correlation between economic freedom, where the government gets out of your way, and low poverty rates. And we know that as soon as governments become big, high taxes, high regulations, it actually drops down a category, and we see poverty goes up from 10% to 30%, so it triples. So constricting economic freedom is never a good idea if you look at the data. At a micro level, there's never been a greater opportunity for anyone who's ambitious and entrepreneurial to go and start a company. It's cheaper than ever to start a company. You can do what Gary's done, which is publish content, build a following, figure out how to monetize it. You can create products and services and sell them to anywhere in the world. You're an example of someone who started with nothing and became a millionaire in your 20s, and then again in your 30s with a completely different thing. He became a millionaire in his 20s, and then again in his 30s he's a best-selling author and a content creator. I did it in my 20s, my 30s, and now my 40s, starting from scratch. So it's it's not normal that 3 guys our age could have done that over and over again. It's because we are living in a time where there is incredible opportunities, but you have to be tapped into those opportunities. You never heard about it at school. You never heard about it at university. You're going to have to learn the skills to get tapped into those opportunities. But there are definitely ways that you can succeed in the world that we're living in.
And on that macro point, who should we be voting for? Because some of your thinking and policy suggestions through this conversation align more with Trump, Elon, the American mission now, where they're welcoming millionaires. They're trying to create a really entrepreneurship-friendly environment. They're doing the Doge, dismantling of sort of government waste.
I agree with Gary. It's not football. You don't have a team. You swing. You should be a swing voter. You should vote every single election. You should make them work hard for your vote. And
is Trump going to succeed, though?
You should. It's too soon to tell.
But he made a prediction, so I'm inviting you to make a prediction. He said 5 years' time, we come back here, we're going to see that Trump.
I think a lot of very wealthy people are going to move to the USA. You're going to get a lot of people from all over the world. He's playing to win, and he wants rich people and entrepreneurs and investors to come into the US and be based there. He's creating golden visas and open visas.
And the success metric here is the middle class get richer and more affluent.
And what I actually think will happen as a result of all of that, you will see rising living standards in the USA, and you'll see a detriment to the places where those people live. It's not a good thing to have the people who pay the majority of the taxes, which is 1% of people paying 30% of taxes. If those people leave, the bills get spread across everybody else.
Well, we'll have to do a part 2, and we shall see. I want to thank you both for the work that you do, because I'm a big fan of both of you. I watch Gary's videos all the time, helps me to understand another perspective on what I'm typically hearing out on the internet, or that I hear on Twitter about what's going on in the world. And I think I really respect and admire people that can do what both of you have done today, which is to exchange and listen to ideas in the pursuit of answers. And that's why I'd highly recommend anybody, regardless of whether you agree with everything or some things or just a little bit, to go and follow Gary's channel on YouTube called Gary's Economics, because it's a great source of information from someone who has done it, understands the world from another perspective, but also someone who's providing a narrative, which I actually think there's, as we kind of talked about before you started, there's a big gap in the market for. There are a lot of people like me and Dan out on the internet that are talking about entrepreneurship and finance and how to make money, but there aren't enough people talking about wealth inequality from the perspective as Gary sees it, and that are providing more sort of collectivist and sort of society-wide solutions and answers and sort of explanations as to why that's ultimately happening. I do think, because I know you, Dan, and I hope I know myself, I do think that we all want the UK to survive. And I think we all believe that the way that the UK survives isn't necessarily a couple of ultra-rich people getting more money. It is sort of social mobility, and it's allowing people that are at the very bottom to create opportunities and to succeed. We all agree upon that, even if we disagree on the causes and the solutions to that. I'd also highly recommend everybody to go check out The Trading Game, because everybody's talking about this book, and I think it's 4 weeks at the moment on the Sunday Times bestseller list.
4 weeks, number one.
Number one. 4 weeks, number one, which is an incredible achievement, but it speaks to what's in this book, the way that the story is told, but also the timeliness of this message. So I'd highly recommend everybody go check it out. I'm going to put a link below so that everybody can go and do it. And if you just look at some of the testimonials for this book, it's profound. I hear people describe it as like unforgettable on one end and then sad on the other end, because that's the nature of the reality it speaks to. And I highly recommend everybody go check out Dan Priestley's Entrepreneur Revolution, but also your website has all of your resources and tools on it. So I'll link that on the screen. What's the...
At danielpriestley.com.
At danielpriestley.com. Thank you both for your generosity. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for bringing us together.
No matter where I am in the world, it seems like everyone is drinking matcha. And there's a good chance that matcha you're drinking is made by a company that I've invested more than 7 figures in, who are a sponsor of this podcast, called Perfect TED. Because they're the brand used globally by cafes like Blank Street Coffee and Joe and the Juice and many, many more. Not only can you get Perfect TED matcha in cafes, but you can now also make it at home. Much cheaper. In seconds, using our flavoured matcha powders that I have here in front of me. Perfect TED matcha is ceremonial grade and sourced from Japan. It is smooth, it is naturally sweet, not like those bitter grassy matchas that I tried before Perfect TED. And if you are one of those people that have told yourself you don't like matcha, it's probably because you haven't tried our Perfect TED matcha. And you can find Perfect TED matcha in the UK in Tesco, Sainsbury's, Holland and Barrett, and in Waitrose, or Albert Heijn if you're in the Netherlands, and on Amazon in the USA, or get the full range online at perfectted.com, where you can get 40% off your first order with code Stephen40. This has always blown my mind a little bit. 53% of you that listen to this show regularly haven't yet subscribed to the show. So could I ask you for a favor? If you like the show and you like what we do here and you want to support us, the free, simple way that you can do just that is by hitting the subscribe button. And my commitment to you is if you do that, then I'll do everything in my power, me and my team, to make sure that this show is better for you every single week. We'll listen to your feedback, we'll find the guests that you want me to speak to, and we'll continue to do what we do. Thank you so much.